Welcome to Outrage Astrology. Greetings from Houston, Texas. My name is Mike, and in the third collaboration with the wonderful Ellie Mooring.
Hello.
Glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. My room smells of so many essential oils right now. I'm just like fuming.
I think you told me earlier it smells like your grandmother.
Yeah, I bought a new one today, and I'm like in the shop. I'm like, this smells great. So I put it in, turn it on at home, and then it just smelled like my nan in the entire house. And I'm like, was not as relaxing as I would hope to have been.
She about to make you eat some of her potato salad, or anyway, never mind. All right. So we have another phenomenal topic for y'all guys this evening. We are talking about the most dreaded transits in all of astrology. The transit that young adults, when they begin to learn about astrology and they start to, look into the concept of transits, they start talking about, well, their Saturn return.
Mm-hmm. Funny that last week we talked about karma in terms of the nodes, and now we're like, oh, let's do Saturnian karma.
Oh yeah, the bitch karma.
But it was funny because before, like I said to you, I kind of planned on doing like a zodiac sign roast, and then my Libra moon was like, no, that's too mean. Let's do Saturn instead. And you're like, oh yeah, because that's so much better. And I'm like, probably.
Well, people get so scared of it, and I think it was really noble of you to decide on this topic, because we're basically telling people out there who, are getting into astrology and they're learning about the true coming of age transit, Saturn return, to not be scared. Being an adult is not scary. This is like your full transition into maturity.
And I think, a lot of people fear Saturn returns and stuff, but, if you're into astrology and you have the awareness, you can see things coming before they're there. So it's like, unlike the average person where they don't have a clue what the hell hit them, you're like, oh, here it comes. Just gonna lean this way a little bit. Oh, that was so much easier than I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah, or you can be like me, who has basically, screwed around their entire adult life, and now I'm like a year away from my Saturn return, and I'm like, oh my god, I gotta get everything ready and straight and stable. Saturn's gonna kick my ass in a year when it comes, makes its full circle. Yeah. So Saturn takes approximately 28 years to travel around, or travel in its elliptical around the sun. So when you are 28 years old, Saturn will have made a chance to start from where it was at when you were born, and it will progress through the entire circle, and it will go back to its starting spot. That is your Saturn return. So it happens at different ages usually, but it's usually at the earliest late 27 to the latest 29.
Yeah. And for the whole progression of that, you have the quarter, like the opposition, the Saturn opposition, and the squares as well to your natal Saturn. So that they give different sort of steps into working up to your Saturn return. It's not just like a whole 28 years sort of thing come around and then bang, it's happened. It's more like there's a major life lesson at the square, the opposition, the second square, back to the conjunction.
Yes, but those Saturn squares and the Saturn opposition's interesting because that one happens right around the time you're 16. So that's when you're starting to really get the full taste, not the full taste, but like your little taste of adulthood. Like you're starting to worry about college, you're starting to learn how to drive and handle the responsibility of having a vehicle. But those Saturn squares in the opposition, they're going to be a lot more noticeable when you're on your second go around on the chart.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're in your 30s and 40s, getting ready for your second Saturn return, which happens when you're approximately 56. Yeah. And that's usually a lot easier to deal with because your level of maturity, your ability to incorporate Saturn into your day-to-day life and your decision-making process is well integrated.
Yeah.
So what was your first impression of Saturn return whenever you first heard about it, or how was it described to you?
Yeah, well, basically, the very first thing that you usually hear the Saturn return is that it's the most horrendous period in your life, which is all about pain, suffering, and agony. And I'm like, I don't think it has to be, because that's not how astrology works, in my opinion. But
No.
So basically, the way that I approach Saturn returns, I remember a few years ago, a friend of mine who was in her late 20s at the time, she was aware of astrology, but she wasn't an astrologer. So she heard about Saturn return, and she asked me, she's like, oh, what's going to come up for me when I experience my Saturn return, sort of thing. And at the time, so her Saturn is in her 5th house, and it was conjunct Neptune and Uranus, I believe.
Oh, goody. She was born in the Capricorn stellium generation?
Yeah. So,
okay.
with it being in her 5th house, and I knew a lot of the things that she would focus on a lot, which tends to be what you go through during like your first 28 years of life, is that wherever your Saturn is placed, it typically is a very strong primary focus for you, because it's a goal, it's an ambition, it's something that you want to achieve. And that's where a lot of fear comes from Saturn, because it's like you want something so bad, you want to work towards it and achieve it so bad, that's like, what if I don't? What if I fail? Because Saturn's also that fear of failure. So
yes.
for her, she would focus a lot on in terms of like romance and relationships, and how that every time she would go to approach someone for dating or something, it fell through, or it just didn't turn out how she would hoped it would be. There would either be something that she thought they weren't, because there was Neptune involved there, and also they would just genuinely be kind of disappointing in terms of her dating life. She's recently gone through her Saturn return now. I think she's finishing up now. And she started her own business. It's really taken off because she's worked so hard to get it off the ground. And I told you before when we first started the talk that I'm from a small rural town. Like, I think there's no more than like 1,000 people from where I'm from, and she's from the same place, and she managed to build up her own business and career based on her own passion. And 5th house is all about like that thing that lights you up, your passions and creativity.
Yeah, so things you create to express yourself. She takes that seriously.
And because Capricorn's involved in that, it's like, making that a kind of business venture or ambition for her as well. So she created her own business based on something that meant something to her. And it's seriously taken off for her now. Like, I'm starting to see the hi Siri. My Siri just started coming up. Mercury retrograde. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, she's really starting to take off now. And I spoke to her recently, and I asked her, how did your Saturn return go? And she's like, yeah, I worked really hard, and I'm very happy with where I am, but I realized something that I never thought I would say. And she said, I don't think I really want kids. And that's, 5th house Saturn sort of thing. And like, that was something that she was worrying about her whole sort of first 30 years of life, is like, where am I going to find a relationship partner who wants to settle down, start a family, do all that? But now she's gone through that return. She's kind of come to the satisfaction of her career's kind of been her baby. Like, this new thing that she's created has been that thing that she's been super passionate about. So for her, she's kind of decided, maybe kids aren't for me, or at least not right now.
Yeah. I've heard before of I've heard women attributing Saturn in the 5th house to difficulty having children.
My mum, 5th house Saturn, the doctors told her that she couldn't get pregnant.
She also had Chiron there too, though.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm her trauma.
Yeah. Now, when you're looking at Saturn in somebody's chart to begin with, a technique or a rule that I use, that I borrow from the Hellenistic method, is Saturn's considered a malefic. But if it's a night chart, if the sun is below the horizon, below the ascendant-descendant axis in the chart, Saturn is going to act more destructively. The house and the sign that Saturn is placed in is going to be an area of obstacle, of extreme difficulty. But if you have a day chart, Saturn is still a malefic, but it's actually more constructive. It doesn't pose as much of an issue. Now, that's kind of a black and white, fatalistic kind of view of Saturn, but I've seen it manifest. So, where's your Saturn?
10th house in Taurus.
Are you a day chart or a night chart?
I'm a night chart.
So
yeah. Well, for me, my approach is still just using the Placidus system, and I just typically, for me personally, I feel like it's my Libra moon in me is that I equate everything equally. So for me,
is Saturn still in the 10th house if you're going by whole signs?
I don't use whole signs. I never really have. That's just not part of my personal practice, so I've never really explored that.
No, and I can completely understand, of course.
I think in other chart explorations that I've tried, it does shift into the 11th.
Okay, good. The method that I'm speaking of, using sect, day chart versus night charts, and the concept of Saturn being destructive versus constructive, Saturn, you only use that rule in conjunction with interpreting it through whole sign.
Yeah.
So normally, if you were going by Placidus, you'd be like, oh, Saturn's destructive and it's in your 10th house using Placidus. And be like, oh, well, you're going to have obstacles to building a career for almost your entire life. Thank God that's not the case. That's not the case because it's in your 11th house. So you're not going to have friends. But yeah. So when you are experiencing your Saturn return, it is all about karma. It's all about what you have done prior to your Saturn return. How much have you embraced Saturnian, principles? Have you been responsible? Have you been ambitious? Have you worked hard? If you haven't,
yes, keep going. Sorry.
If you haven't, you are going to experience the consequences of not having done that.
Yeah.
A way that it was described to me that really resonated was it's basically like the metaphorical version of daddy's home. Like when you're a child and it was just the kids and the mom at the house. If the kids were acting up all day, when dad gets home from work, dad's gonna, if you've been acting up and not doing your stuff, you're gonna get your punishment. Dad's gonna come home and he's gonna yell at you or whip you or whatever he does. But if you've been good all day, if you've been doing what you're supposed to, if you've been responsible, then nothing bad's really going to happen. In fact, good things can happen.
I really like that interpretation. Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about Saturn is that, the whole concept of him being a malefic is the fact that, no, things aren't easy where Saturn is because it's intentionally something that you need to put in work and effort in order to grow and manifest what you want. And I understand not many people like hard work because hard work can suck. And depending on how Saturn is aspected in your chart, so if for you that you have a lot of squares and oppositions to Saturn to different parts of your chart, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit more intense because the nature of a square and opposition is tension in itself.
Yes.
But even then, one of my favorite astrologers that I watch, and he's on YouTube as well, called Steve Judd. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I have heard of him.
Yeah. So he was talking about Saturn, and he was describing Sun Trines Saturn, and that's something that I have in my chart, hence why I was kind of interested in his explanation of it. And he said that he found that a lot of people who have Sun Trines Saturn often have an absent father figure, but that doesn't necessarily mean physically, but overall, just overall in the general life is that the father figure wasn't present and the individual had to grow up quick, learn quick, mature quickly to be able to handle different facets of life. And my dad was around, but there was no real sort of interaction with him.
Yes.
So even if you do have trines and sextiles to Saturn, it doesn't necessarily mean that, again, it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns because the nature of Saturn itself is...
Yeah, just because it's an easy aspect doesn't change what Saturn is. I'm sorry, I'm stop interrupting.
No, but that's exactly it. But the trines and sextiles can indicate that you have sort of better resonance and being able to handle those lessons because you're like, okay, well, this is hard work, This is gonna suck, but I'm gonna bite the bullet and do it. Just get it over with, and that's it. Yeah.
Well said.
My mum
So-
has the aspect as well, so she's like, her motto that she drilled into me when I was young was get it over and done with.
So I've got one really nasty aspect from Saturn in my chart, and it's opposing the moon. And then with the nature of the opposition, another individual could be a big factor in creating what problem Saturn, because the opposition usually means interference from an outside person. Squares represent situational instances, and then conjunction is an internal thing. But it's in opposition to my moon, so I don't know. I don't. I wouldn't say my mother doesn't really interfere with my life, really. So I wonder how that's going to manifest. But we're going to kind of go over that a little bit. Other than that, all I've got is a trine to the ascendant, a sextile to Mercury. Oh, and a quintile to Venus.
I don't really have many Saturnian aspects to personal planets other than the trine to my sun and a square to my Mars. I know those are my personal planet ones. Yeah, it's basically like, and this is where it kind of messes me up, is that I've got Aries midheaven, right? Saturn in the 10th, but Saturn squares my Mars. So it's like the 10th house ruler is being squared by Saturn in the 10th. So it's just like, this career thing is not working out for me, is it?
I don't think that well, with the nature of
that was a joke.
Yeah, I know, but it actually I think it'd make you quite obsessive.
It does.
Yes, and with Mars being in the second, It's really funny cause that's interesting how Placidus works, because it takes the horizon, it takes the midhaven place, and it will shift it so far over. Mm-hmm. Normally, the second and the 10th house are inconjunct energies, or trined energies, but it's just because it's pushed over so far, it actually turns it into a square, which is really interesting.
It's where my Saturn placement is. So my Mars is in 3 degrees Leo, and my Saturn's at 3 degrees Taurus.
Yes. So. So, when you're looking at your Saturn return to interpret how the Saturn return is going to manifest for you, and granted, it can come in a variety of areas, but the house placement is going to be specifically, it's that themes related to that house are going to resonate with you very strongly during the course of your Saturn return. So, me and Ellie will be systematically doing the marathon of a description series of Saturn returns through all the houses. So, first house.
So who's starting with first house? Me or you?
Huh?
Who's starting, me or you?
You.
Okay. Saturn in the first house. So what I've seen with individuals with this placement is that they're basically direction in life. Sometimes I feel like they're constantly hitting a wall, pretty much. It's like everything that they go to initiate, they're like, oh, there's something interrupting me there. There's something blocking me every time I go in that direction. It kind of feels like there can be a bit of a struggle and lead up to finding a clear sense of direction in life, or at least also a sense of own responsibility and self-responsibility, I think, is that, taking responsibility for your own actions, especially if it's, Saturn in Aries. It's like, if you do this, this will result in this sort of thing.
Yes.
Other things I've got is like a sense of independence, but it's not the same as independence of Saturn in the 7th. It's more about like, can you take the self-initiation to do what you want or get to the goal that you want to without having any sort of influence on the outside whatsoever to get you motivated to get up and do whatever you want to do, whatever you are aiming to achieve, rather than just seeing like, I want that thing over there, but I'm going to sit on the couch and do nothing and just look at it.
The Saturn return in the first house basically teaches you need to get the fuck up off the couch and go get it, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think it's really interesting with that placement. Margaret Thatcher, she had Saturn in the first house. And Saturn in the first house, she actually had it conjunct the ascendant, which made her come off very prim and proper. But yeah. But so having Saturn in the first house, it gives the individual a sense of feeling very limited based on their appearance, who they are, their gender, their color, their just the way they look. They feel challenged in just because of their appearance. Margaret Thatcher, she was very much trying to assert herself in, the House of Commons or the House of Lords, the House of Commons, and she was a woman. So literally, her being who she was a massive roadblock, and she had to really learn to assert herself in a way that was conducive to getting what she wanted, despite the fact that her appearance, her body, her reproductive organs were in itself a handicap.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot about the Saturn return in the first house, is learning to not allow who you are and how you look to be a handicap, and to really assert yourself regardless of who you are.
Yeah. And I reckon people with Saturn in the first house, they can take a real strong sense of authority in a situation once they really learn how to master that energy, because it's in the forefront of who you are as a person. So it's like, if you can learn to harness that ability to be assertive and be like, no, this is how it's going to go, this is why. Don't argue with me, sort of like. But it's learning how to get respect rather than doing it by force as well.
Yes.
So yeah.
I mean, think about what she did during the Falkland War. But I don't know if they teach that kind of thing. And anyway.
Not in Australia.
Okay. Well, I think y'all are all the Commonwealth. Okay, so Saturn in the second house. That placement sucks. It was traditionally viewed as a marker of poverty, but a lot of billionaires and millionaires have Saturn in the second house. So, because you obsess, that fear of lack is so...
Saturn. Yeah. He does reward you. If you work hard enough, he will reward you, and it will be like real, like sort of on the material plane, because that's what Saturn's all about. It's that like real in the here now sort of thing. So yeah, with Saturn in the second house or in Taurus, it's about financial struggles can be a thing where you're constantly working hard until getting the sort of income that you want to achieve, but also working with the resources that you have. So again, this may be limited in terms of resources that you want to go towards your goals. So whether that's like, let's say for me, like being a graphic designer, I don't have Saturn in the second house, but being a graphic designer, what I need is having a laptop or some kind of digital drawing device that I can create content with, right? But if you've got Saturn in the second house, maybe you don't have access to these technologies, or there's some sort of boundary put in between you and the resources that you have. So it's either learning how to save enough to get the resources that you want, or just saving in general is also a second house Saturn lesson as well.
Yes. The whole lesson is to not be frivolous. The thing about Saturn in the second house, it always seems like people that have that placement, like, oh, I just got $100 and it's gone.
Yeah.
It's really what it seems like with them. And it's really that placement is, you really, really have to grit your teeth and save. You have to be kind of an asshole about it too.
Even just aside from the money stuff, like a lot of people tend to forget the second house is also about self-worth and self-value. So what I've seen a lot of people with second house Saturn is that they really struggle just to appreciate themselves as well. Different from first house, where it's more like about your external and who you are as a person. When it moves into the second, it's all about your self-worth and self-value. Your self-value equates to how much responsibility that you're willing to take, as well as your connection with others. Because if you don't value yourself in terms of connecting with others, then you just won't. Because you're like, why bother? Why would people care? Because I don't value me, so why would you?
Exactly.
So and it's learning how to, that's another Saturnian lesson, is like getting past that point of, it's basically like stop being so hard on yourself, but it's
Yeah. To learn that you have worth in this world.
mm,
That, yeah, and then the resources that you have and
and
all that
charging
stuff
for your
you
worth.
value. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, if I don't care about myself, then nothing matters. So why should I save, or why should I,
Mm,
work towards having better for myself if it doesn't
mm,
matter? It's yeah. So Saturn return in the second house can be pretty rough.
mm,
Coming up upon financial issues, debts. I knew one individual that gotten quite a lot of money, not sorry, gotten quite a lot of trouble during his Saturn return in the second house because he was so desperate for money that he started forging checks.
mm,
He
yeah.
got in a lot of trouble over that.
I just got
Ner-
this. Sorry,
no,
I keep interrupting. I just got this quick little insight thing just then that just happened about Saturn being in fixed houses. I feel like that's gonna feel like hitting a wall a bit harder because fixed house energy is already that sort of structured feeling. Then you add Saturnian energy on top of that, and it's just like, holy crap! Like
yeah,
it can feel like a solid smack because Saturn is ruled by Capricorn and Capricorn's a cardinal sign. I feel like in terms of the cardinal houses, it would probably be a little bit more flexible and mutable houses,
it's
but
easy. I think it's easier to deal with when you have it in a succeeding houses or succeeding
mm,
houses. Yeah. So
but
like,
yeah,
I'm interested. No,
sorry.
go ahead. I'm interested to hear your interested to hear your take on the third house.
On the third house, Saturn in the third house. So usually, what I've seen with this placement is that people can have learning difficulties, not necessarily disabilities, but just genuinely difficulty learning in school. They may have a hard time getting through elementary school, primary school, high school, and it may not necessarily be that the work is necessarily hard. It's just potentially having a hard time focusing, having a hard time comprehending things, learning, and also communication. So these elements all tie into the one thing when it comes to getting through the early school years is that you need to be able to comprehend the information, you need to be able to retain it and then relay it.
Yeah, a lot of
So,
them feel like they're slow learners.
yeah. And they have a hard time communicating as well, like trying to get the words out that they want to say. And it's like, they're like, I can think what I want to say, but I just can't articulate it in the way that I want.
Now, I actually saw a really funny meme about Saturn in the third house the other day, and it was like, "Look, see right here, even your birth chart says you're stupid."
Oh gosh.
I swear to God, astrology has invaded the internet. um, so what would you say? It's a tricky one for me with Saturn in the third house because I don't want to say that it's going to cause learning disabilities. I'm not. I
No,
don't.
it's not that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really amorphous, like because it can be positive too. Very very serious thinker, somebody who takes a really long time to come to
Mm,
decisions, but also
mm.
somebody that can't come to quick decisions.
And also the third house is about your neighborhood as well. So maybe there could be some kind of separation or feeling
Isolate.
disconnected from, isolated in your own neighborhood sort of thing.
Yeah.
So in terms of the actual karma that comes with that and the lessons in that, if you are someone who struggles with learning and communication, it will be very much about, learning how to learn or learning the best ways and methods for you to retain information that's best for you. Because I know we're taught a lot in school that you have to memorize stuff. And people
Yeah.
who do have third house Saturn, they can have a solid memory. Like, ooh, they can remember stuff from like way, way back. But in terms of like trying to force information, trying to force to remember it, that may not work for them. So finding ways that they can learn and can retain information, and also ways of communicating with other people that's comfortable for them or they feel the most fluent with.
Yes. It's also I think Saturn return in the third house is creating a situation where you have to learn to not be so sluggish making decisions.
Mm. It can also have to do with siblings as well, depending.
Yeah, but it potentially, if you're really, really involved with your family, it could have the issues that you have to deal with involving your siblings. But everybody's situation's different. So I mean,
That's what I mean. Yeah.
You could see somebody who has Saturn in the third house that doesn't have any siblings. But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
so on to the fourth house, Saturn in the fourth house.
Could be mummy issues with this one sometimes.
Could be daddy issues. It's mostly just family issues.
Yeah, pretty much in general. Like I do know someone personally who has Saturn in the fourth house, and they have a hard time with both their parents pretty much. So I can't really like sway it to either mother or father. It's generally like either fitting into the family or feeling like they have to be the responsible one in the family at an early age, feeling like they have to take the responsibility, or they have to be the parent or the mature one because either someone in the family isn't, or potentially could be the opposite where one parent is just like the lord of the household and they have to like answer to their every sort of like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can do that, you can't do that.
So Saturn in the fourth house, from what I've seen, usually it is a child that, or when they were young, when they were in the fourth house part of their life and their upbringing, they were put in a position where they had to assume a lot of responsibility early on. I've seen it really often with children whose parents were not around at all, or one parent was really, really irresponsible, or they were the oldest of several siblings. And they had a really, really difficult time finding emotional security when they were young, feeling totally emotionally stable when they were growing up. And so a lot of times it can manifest as they become an adult, having a very difficult time creating a family environment for themselves, like with a wife and child or husband and children, where they feel emotionally secure. They fixate on it quite a bit. They're always looking for the perfect wife or the perfect husband to have children with, to build a family with, and they, in many ways, obsess over it. But depending on whether it's a day chart or a night chart and other aspects at hand, it can be rather difficult for them to get that perfect setup in terms of like having a happy family.
And what I've found too with people with Saturn in the fourth house is that when they do start like living with someone, whether that's like a partner or whatever, I've seen them tend to want to hang on to those people because they're like, okay, I'm comfortable with you. Please do not leave because you have become part of my home security. Like, you give me comfort. So, they kind of can attach to people who they begin to live with that may be outside of their family. But also when it comes to the home in general, like this, in terms of karma and working towards something, this can be working towards having your own independent home. In the worst case scenario, I have seen someone with Saturn in the fourth go through their Saturn return where they actually lost their residence for whatever reason, whether that was being evicted or didn't have enough money to pay for rent or whatever that was. So, and again, it's all about what you're doing previously, working up towards that sort of
exactly
thing.
I've seen it go both ways. I actually had a client recently who had Saturn in the fourth house, and then she experienced an eclipse right as she was having her Saturn return. So not only did she have her Saturn return, but an eclipse hit it at the same time. And then it was like, boom, job gone, house gone, had to move, had to go.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. But then there's another individual I know who he actually had a child, bought a house, like did all the things because he had done a lot of things in his life to allow him the ability to do that. But yeah, he actually built up an actual, a legitimate foundation for himself, because he had a positive Saturn return, because he had set he had done the correct things to give himself the ability to do that. So house number 5.
House number 5. So as we said earlier in video about can be to do with having children a bit later in life. Not always the case, but as you've said before, a lot of mothers have kind of brought that about and saying, well, my mum didn't have me up until her Saturn return afterwards. It's not the case for everyone, because it can be the children become your biggest life lesson. And you can potentially find that the children that you have can be very mature for their age. And
you are.
Well, I school my mum.
Feeling like their child's the parent?
Hey?
Feeling like their child's the parent?
Well, it's not just the parent, but it's like the children can be quite wise as well, but at the same time, it's like being able to be receptive to your children as an independent individual sort of thing, and having respect for your own children that you have. But also sometimes you can end up with difficult children that's going to make you need to take responsibility and mature as a parent and like keep you cool carrying out like the typical responsibilities of a parent, but also as I mentioned with my friend, like turning her passion into like a business for her was something that manifested for her individually.
Yes.
Do you have anything else to add to that?
Oh yeah, because it doesn't always have to deal with children.
No.
So I've seen. So the Saturn in the 5th house can be issues related to expressing yourself. So they can be. It's kind of like the party pooper aspect. I've seen issues with men having erectile dysfunction very early in adulthood as a result of it. I've seen individuals who have terrible luck with anything speculative. Like, it is the worst placement you can possibly have to have. It's the worst placement you could possibly have and simultaneously be a stockbroker or have a gambling addiction.
Yeah.
It's not great for anything speculative. It can be an extreme aversion to risk, which can be a big problem, especially when you want to go out on a limb to achieve your goals. That can be a big issue. And I think that issues related to children could be a result of a Saturn return in the 5th house. But I also think being put in positions where you have to understand the necessity of taking risks, calculated risks.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really difficult lesson for some people to learn, and some people really never learn that lesson.
And also, it's about like these people just learning how to let go and have fun in general, and not be so like everything I do for entertainment must be for a specific purpose. Like it has to serve some kind of end result. Otherwise, what's the point in kind of doing that? As I've seen before, which is like. But yeah, it's just about and that was another thing that just came to mind too, is that some people that I've known with 5th house Saturn is that during their childhood they didn't get to play really. Like they had to grow up pretty early on too, and fun play was just not a priority. Like they just couldn't. They basically had to either get a job earlier on, and it had to basically had to embrace the job as being their sort of play pretty much. But yeah, it kind of took away their childhood in terms of being able just to be fun, expressive, and creative. It was all about like, children should be seen, not heard, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you get to really, really hopefully understand the necessity of allowing yourself to let loose a little bit. Either that, or you get hit with a really terrible lesson and you decide to loosen up that one time during your Saturn return, and then like you just like go to jail, or you lose your house, or gamble away your life savings. So what about Saturn in the 6th?
So what I've seen with these people growing up, they pretty much started working early on. I've seen from usually around the age of 12, I've seen them start working. either that's something, a little job around the house, or working for something in the family. I've seen a lot of, but it's definitely about, there can be health stuff to focus on there. So basically, this one specifically is definitely taking care of your health properly up until you're in your 30s. Like, if you don't take care of your health properly, you're going to get hit with some massive, whatever it is, going to manifest itself as.
It's a great placement for bodybuilding.
Really? I've not seen that yet.
It is a great.
It, though.
Yeah, because you fixate. That's because some people really, if you tone into your Saturn, it can become obsessive. Like my Saturn, when we get to my house, I'll talk about it a little more. But the house that my Saturn occupies, I obsess over it. Like I cannot get enough of it.
Oh, same. Same.
Yeah, your career, mine is my learning and the ability to travel and stuff like that. So yeah, health problems can be definitely a big issue. People with Saturn in the 6th, they learned very early on that if you want anything, you gotta work. They're the workhorses of the zodiac.
Oh yeah.
And it's very rewarding. The big problem with that, this is something that I see a lot with Saturn in the 6th during their Saturn return, is injuries related to overworking yourself.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I see that really frequently. Or you're just gonna like wake up one day around the age of 29 and all your pets are gonna be dead.
In terms of like other health complications as well that I've kind of seen, is that there can be a tendency, depending on other aspects involved, but I have seen people with Saturn in the 6th, they do have a tendency for restriction in the health department. So I have seen some people manifest, things like anorexia, bulimia, or some other kind of restrictive diet or exercise regime that they become so sterile and square when it comes to their health regime that it can, when they're older, manifest as health complications because they were too strict earlier on. And it can be like malnutrition or overworking the body, making the body do things for a long period of time that it shouldn't be doing. So those are some things to be aware of, is that, like, it's all great to be healthy and into your health and fitness. I am one of those people, but it's when it becomes to the stage where you are consciously restricting yourself from food, or you're just over exercising or whatever. Those can lead to health complications further down the track. And when your Saturn return hits, that's potentially what the outcome could be, is that, you have this, or this came up, sort of thing, or your body would just be like, I can't do it anymore. Like,
you're hospitalized at 28 years old, or congratulations, you have diabetes. What? Yeah. So Saturn in the 7th. You know a little bit about this one. I know about it.
I don't know too much about it now.
People take relationships very, very seriously. They do not want to die alone.
No, they do not. And sometimes they don't let go. Even when they want to let go. It's like, ugh. Okay, so Saturn in the 7th house. As you can tell, I've got a lot of angst for this placement.
You suppress it.
Huh?
You suppress it very well.
Oh, clearly with all my Leo placements, how could I? But yeah, Saturn in the 7th house, relationship issues, woo! So basically what I've seen a lot of people with 7th house Saturn is that they're attracted to the wrong people earlier on. They put in full investment into these people who end up kind of toppling them over a bit later on, because they tend to not be the person who they thought they'd be, or they put in too much time and effort into a particular relationship that ends up being a lot more challenging than kind of necessary in a relationship. But the thing is, I see a lot of them is that they don't like to let go once they've kind of, because I've seen I don't like to say it's the case for every person with Saturn in the 7th house, but it's almost like they fall in love that one time, or that's that one relationship that they're going to remember forever, and it's like that thing that's just not going to top it. So it's like I've seen in the 7th house, if they get married, this is a more fatalistic perspective of it, but like I've seen if they get married before the Saturn return, marriage can like get a bit tense during the Saturn returns.
It can really, really mess with their self-esteem. Your Saturn return in your 7th house is going to make any relationship that is not built on a solid foundation just crumble. It'll also make you very, very much more serious than you already are about your relationships. The thing about Saturn in the 7th that I notice is they treat it as like a project, I guess. Like they treat it in a way where like if I put work into it and just work, everything's gonna be fine. It all rests on me. If I just work at it. But they're not taking into account the fact that the other person has free will.
Yeah, and also there's this thing that I've seen Saturn in the 7th manifest is this basically what they've painted as expectations in a relationship and roles. They're like, I need to fulfill these particular things as this role is played in a relationship. So I am, like, let's say I am the girlfriend. I must fulfill these particular roles in the relationship for it to be successful. Because it's that whole project thing that you mentioned. It's that they treat it like this is my part that I play in the relationship. This is your part. I have to do this and be responsible for this part in the relationship. And, you know, they feel responsible for the other person as well. And that's not how relationships are supposed to work. They're supposed to be a lot more fluid back and forth, Libra energy. But Saturn in the 7th can make it that it ends up being like, I'm responsible for everything about this person. Or it's like,
I think that it's interesting with the Saturn in the 7th that there's a little bit of a trick to dealing with this particular Saturn return. You need to look at what planet is ruling the 7th and where that planet's at, and you need to look at what house Saturn is ruling. Because that one's a little bit more complex, because when you're down at the bottom half of the chart, you're dealing with more internal issues. The 7th house is specifically related to other people, and the keys to forming good relationships. So having Saturn in that placement, you have to look to other areas to figure out what parts of yourself you need to improve upon so that your relationships don't absolutely just hit and bite the dust whenever you have your Saturn return in the 7th house. So that one's a little bit more of a complex placement in my opinion.
But also, because it is Saturn in the 7th house, it's like once you get past that return, or if you are working in that relationship in a healthy way, you can literally have a lifelong relationship that's can be quite healthy and very loyal.
Well, my dad has Saturn in the 7th, my dad has Saturn in the 7th, and whenever he had his Saturn return was when I was born, and and he bought a house right around that time as well, and my mother was like his trophy wife, but that crashed. My mother was his trophy wife. My mother was like way outside way outside out of his league. Like it was like Fred Flintstone and Wilma, but but he is now his relationships, his amount of dedication to his relationships was very rewarding. I mean, too bad there were some other things about him that were absolutely a nightmare, but that one particular thing, Saturn did reward him with steady, stable relationships. So moving on, Saturn in the 8th.
Ooh, just as fun, just as intense, maybe a little bit more so sometimes. So first off, where I would like to start with Saturn in the 8th is about other people's material possessions and resources.
And taxes.
Yeah, and taxes. So it's like, I feel this could potentially manifest as being limited in terms of having accessibility to other people's resources. So this could potentially be something along the lines of potentially like in the terms of a parent's will, whatever's left for the individual. Maybe there could be potentially some restrictions on that individual. If they are expecting more from them, there can be some complications there I've seen before. Also, yeah.
You see that a lot in the second Saturn return, in the eighth, is issues with the will. I've noticed the first Saturn return in the eighth, the issues are sometimes they're around intimacy, but what I've seen more often than anything is issues related to credit.
Really?
Yes, issues related to credit or issues related to taxes or not paying your taxes in previous years. And trying to seek out loans, like a loan to build a business or a loan to get a house, or issues dealing with borrowing money, other people's money. I see that a lot. Also, with women, I see it a lot if they're in a long-term relationship. I'll see their partner going through tough financial times, or having something that happens to their spouse, and they have to really pick up the pieces and really push themselves to help issues that aren't technically theirs, but because they're in an eighth house, mush with them, they have to really, get involved.
Yeah, so eighth house is, again, it works in contribution with the seventh as well. So if you are in a relationship and you are sharing resources and finances with a partner and then you separate, there can be potentially some stuff around there in terms of who gets what sort of thing that can happen with that. I think there's some other things, like in terms of intimacy. Is there anything specific about intimacy, like just sexual, or?
Well, also there can be issues related to fear of intimacy, having to deal with, because the eighth is it's part of the emotional triplicity of the fourth, eighth, and 12th house. So there is potentially issues related to overcoming past traumas. So like all of a sudden issues that happened to you in your childhood, you having to sort of deal with them so that you can experience greater intimacy. It's really funny is the whole sex and all that stuff like that in traditional astrology, like, Hellenistic astrology, none of that's mentioned. It's all death and taxes.
Well, death is another thing that is a
possibility.
I don't mean that it's like, oh, you're gonna die young. No.
No.
Like, it can be
experiencing death.
Yeah. So experiencing a loved one passing away, or experiencing someone or it could be someone that you have no affiliation with. It can be just around the topic of death. It doesn't have to be directly associated with the person or the individual, but it's just that learning how to be mature in those times of like serious loss of something as well.
Crisis. It could be periods of very intense crisis. Huh?
Yes. Siri. I said serious, and Siri's just like, I didn't find any notes. I'm like, I didn't ask you for any.
So I have this placement: Saturn in the 9th house.
You can start with that one because you've got that one. You start with that one.
Okay. All right. So Saturn in the 9th house. I'm really interested to see how my Saturn return is going to play out, because I haven't really conceptualized how that's going to work out for me. But the 9th house is issues with higher education. It can be. But also you can take learning very, very seriously. Like, that's how it's always manifested for me, is I taught myself how to speak 2 other languages just because I wanted to. I take that very seriously. I study obsessively. I read obsessively. I watch documentaries obsessively. That's all I do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, higher education has always been a challenge for me. I've always had some obstacle getting in the way of me being able to go to, like, finish university. Like, I've gone to school. I excelled in school, but something has always happened. Either it was a money issue or it was, circumstantial. There was just always something getting in the way of me being able to either travel or experience higher education. But I work obsessively towards being able to do that one day. And actually, lately, I have gotten the chance to travel quite a bit long distance, which is something that I've always just really wanted to do. But
Do you think Saturn in the ninth house could also test your belief system and your spirituality?
yes, that's actually very true.
So I'm
I
thinking in terms
a
of
lot.
like external people potentially saying like, you shouldn't be doing those sort of things, or like you can't believe in that, or that's
Yeah.
kind of what, So I feel like that's going to be very much about standing up for your own belief systems or your own sense of spirituality. It could be inversing some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like religious doctrine, or someone who's like a part of a religious religion. I can't think of the word.
I mean, that could actually legitimately happen. Like once my Saturn returns in a year, I mean, I could come under fire from somebody who doesn't feel like astrology is legitimate, or they consider it to be anti-Christian, or I mean, I could come under fire for that easily. I mean, I run a YouTube channel and I run a practice on astrology, so I wouldn't really take that to be so far from plausible. That's actually quite plausible.
Because what I'm picturing with Saturn in the ninth house is someone who's an authority or claims to be an authority figure over a religion. So it may not even necessarily be someone of an alternate religion. It could be someone who's in astrology who perceives them being a bigger authority over you, and telling you what to do and how you should be doing it, and challenging you in terms of your own practice and potentially your own beliefs in regards to that. And it's more like, I don't feel like Saturn's always about proving yourself, but staying strong in your own foundations and your own convictions, that you know what you're doing and that your beliefs are true, especially for you and what you've experienced and what you've done.
Wow. That's actually a really interesting way to think about it. I didn't think about it in those terms, but that would actually really resonate. It really resonates with what possibly could happen to me.
That's probably the most clearest interpretation I've had thus far.
That just kind of like just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sometimes I'm waiting for my Uranus Mercury to kick in. Sometimes I'm like, give me something.
Okay, is it Uranus?
I don't like saying Uranus. That's why I say Uranus. That's my Libra moon trying to be polite, but it's probably Uranus. But because I'm Australian, it comes out like real thick. Uranus.
Well,
It's like,
the way that the original word was pronounced was Uranos. Uranus. Yeah, I just call it Uranus. I think that doesn't sound pretentious, and it doesn't sound like I'm saying Uranus.
That's why I don't like saying Uranus. It's just so I say Uranus, but I know it's probably wrong, but I don't care.
I don't think there's a right way at this point. I like Uranus though. It sounds anyway. Wait. Okay. Anyway. Saturn in the 10th house. So.
Daddy issues. Yay.
Not necessarily. Did you know that in ancient astrology, the 10th house is actually the mother, and then the 4th house is the father? In modern astrology, they flipped it.
Either way, for me, it's just like it would ring true either way. Difficult parents.
Well, Saturn is in domicile in the 10th house, just for starters. So it's considered a really good place to have it. Workaholic tendencies, very plausible.
Yeah. Very ambitious. Sorry?
I love that about you, though. You take your life direction very seriously.
Sorry, I keep talking over the top here. Damn it, Gemini. So yeah, very ambitious, very focused on goals, career, making something of themselves in the world, and that's where I literally called my mum last night, basically saying about my career and where I want to head after I graduate university. And I said to her, there's nothing else I want more in life than to succeed in the goals that I have. And that's not necessarily being top in the business department or top in terms of like my own career. It's just getting to the highest pinnacle of what I can achieve through my own efforts and my own work ethic with no one else's sort of input, because basically I don't know if it depends on anything aspected in the chart, but it's like I felt like my whole childhood everything was done for me, and I never had that opportunity to just go out there and do something for myself. And I said to my mum, I was like, look, if I end up on someone's couch doing astrology and tarot just because I love it for my career and my ambitions, I'm going to do it, because I do not care about anything else other than achieving these goals. So it's about, how many sacrifices are you willing to do to get to that like goal or ambition?
Absolutely. And I really, really love that mantra. I really love that mindset. That's why Saturn's considered to be quite pleasant in the 10th house. Now, if you're looking at a night chart and it's in the 10th house, it wouldn't be in the 10th house in yours. It'd only be in the 10th house if it was in Aries. If you're looking at a night chart, that can be constantly having issues with authority figures, like bosses that are really domineering, or obstacles, sort of like in the first house, obstacles related to your career advancement because of things that are outside of your control, or how society views you because of being a certain way. People using you and walking over you, climbing up your back to get in the career field. Luckily, your Saturn in whole sign is in the 11th house, so you can actually take both of those interpretations and use them interchangeably, or you can use them both.
Because I definitely resonate with both. So it's like, in terms of my ambitious streak, like if I didn't have Saturn in the 10th house, I probably wouldn't like make sense in any other respect.
Yes.
But so another thing with Saturn in the 10th house, it's all about your reputation. So if you do something stupid, everyone's going to know about it.
Fucking come after you. Yeah.
People will know about it. And that's the thing, is that I don't know how many people read the tarot watching this, but if anyone knows what the Tower card is.
Oh, God.
I'll grab it if I can find it. Good old 78 cards, going to take me a while to probably get through. But in terms of the only way I can describe what Saturn in the 10th house could do, if you don't maintain your reputation, I can goddamn find it. Of course, going through 78 tarot cards, it makes it a lot more entertaining.
I'm looking for it too. Yeah, the Saturn.
It's going to be at the very bottom of the pop. There she is.
Found it.
Jinx.
But I have it on the Hermetic deck. You have to be very careful with how you appear in the public eye, because it can send you crashing down. That can be a manifestation of having Saturn return in the 10th house. It's doing something.
The whole thing about the Tower is that the Tower has been built up over a freaking long time. Like, if you can think about the date when the Tarot was made, building towers was not just like a quick construction. This took forever to build. And all of a sudden, it can go to shit, and everything that you built up for yourself can come crashing down just because you did something that was not respectable, or just anything that could be taken as super offensive to the public eye, or just letting your reputation go as a leader or someone who is an authority figure. Because as soon as you lose respect, good luck trying to get that back.
Absolutely. So, the 11th house.
You can start with this one, because I want to hear how much this is going to suck.
It ain't that bad.
Yeah. If
anything, it's a lonely place to have Saturn. No. It can be difficulties resonating within groups. It can be difficult. It's not like it's almost as if like you struggle to really be part of something. It's sort of like feeling like a loner, but it's not. It's like even when it's the feeling lonely even when you're surrounded by people sometimes, unfortunately. What do you think about it?
For me, I've often found that I'm probably in a more mature mindset than most people in my area. So I'm in my 20s and I'm in a university dorm. So I see a lot of people like drinking and partying and all this sort of stuff. And I'm sitting over here thinking like I'm not interested in any of that and I don't want to be a part of that. So it's pretty much self-isolation on the basis of like my own feelings about those sort of things. It's not that I got anything against them. It's just that that's not my preference of how I like to fit in. So what I do is I tend to have friends with people who are much older than me
Hmm.
because I feel like I resonate more with them.
Do you
But
drink at all?
I have on occasion, but like if we were to count this year, I've probably drank like twice.
Yeah, I don't really drink a whole
I
lot
don't
anymore.
smoke
So
and I don't do drugs either. So it's just like, yay, Virgo. But it's not like I'm against any of that stuff. It's just that in terms of things that I would do, like occasionally for fun or something, but when it comes to fitting into groups, like what I find most common is that I don't fit in with people my age. Always people
yeah,
who are older. Yeah.
it's also the 11th house has a lot to do with hopes and dreams.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
And I think that in a way, because it's sort of in domicile in the 11th as well.
Mm.
Because it allows you to
Well, it
you
is
feel
ruled by Aquarius. Like Aquarius is partially ruled by Saturn in traditional astrology. So.
yeah, it's actually having Saturn in the 11th house can make you feel compelled to maintain your sense of individuality within the group.
Mm.
It can make you feel a little bit lonely, but it kind of allows you to really take your ideals seriously, your opinions of the world seriously. Um, it's a fairly, I think it can be a really positive placement if it's manifested in the right way.
I was about to say, well, the thing is with Saturn, because it is, like I mentioned before, is it is an Earth-based planet and it can materialize things. So if you can materialize your hopes and dreams through your Saturn return, if you keep, again, working towards manifesting it into reality, then it could almost be the equivalent of a 10th house kind of action, but hopes and dreams isn't necessarily the same as ambition because it's like ambition is like, I want to do this goal, and hopes and dreams is like, I would love to have a Ferrari.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you can dream it, if you can dream it, you can do it. Hell. Now, so I mean, the Saturn return in the 11th house. Then, I mean, how do you feel like that would manifest?
For me personally,
Well, in general, but
general.
you got you got a while before you start coming up on your Saturn return. So enjoy your early 20s.
Yeah, pretty much. But in general, other things, I feel like it would be about finding your own sense of community and where you kind of fit in, and also pushing yourself past self-isolation and making connections with people rather than just thinking like they're all morons, I'm not even going to try, sort of thing. Like if you've got a negative mentality about groups and fitting in with other people, then that self-isolation is going to be based on your own actions. So if you get
Yeah,
conscious that,
you could
yeah,
actually, if you don't work through it and focus on that a little bit, you could actually end up missing out on the opportunity to realize your hopes and dreams because of isolation.
yeah,
And so you have to really, really focus on making, instead of like fitting in with everybody, making meaningful contacts.
yeah,
So networking, just you can be picky about. I mean, you're a Virgo sun, so it'll be easy for you, but making meaningful contacts, networking in a way that's constructive, not just networking with everybody for the sake of networking, where you get involved with a bunch of dimwits who have,
Dennis, why do you think I'm here?
Mazel tov. I appreciate that. Thank you. You just gave me like a backhand compliment. It was
Yeah.
a veiled compliment.
It's a compliment, so.
So, Saturn in the 12th house.
So the first thing that came to mind with this one is potentially, I don't know how you feel about this because you have experienced this before, but like when it comes to confinement, prison potentially, it can also be to do with mental health. So
Yes.
in terms of mental health challenges, if someone has Saturn in the 12th house, particularly if it's in a water sign or harsh aspects to other kind of watery planets, potentially, it can manifest as, being in a psychological ward in terms of like healing and getting better and getting through that. But because I've got close friends who have been through that before. I don't know if they don't have Saturn in the 12th, but they do have Saturn in Pisces. So it has manifested as, time out, confinement in terms of, it really varies depending on sign and other planets involved, but that's one minor potential manifestation of that as a return. But it's not necessarily something to be afraid of because it may not be to that extreme, because it may not be a vicinity, more or less. It can literally be your own self-confinement.
Yes.
Or retreat, or going out and leaving other people behind to be in your own space as well.
Yeah, living out in the country for a little while with nobody around for miles.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that sounds lovely right now.
Sounds like the Hermit card.
Yeah, it does. It can be issues related to confinement. It can be, well, thing about Saturn in the 12th house, it can be karmic issues. Jewish, believe it or not, Kabbalistic astrology, the Jewish version of astrology, they actually attribute Saturn in the 12th house with being somebody who has karmic links to the Holocaust or the Shoah.
Okay.
Surprisingly. And it's a very interesting placement because it can manifest in so many different ways, but there's issues linking to your subconscious feelings. There's issues linking to your karmic past, and there tends to be a lot of karmic baggage that they would really believe. And it's also difficult accessing your spirituality. There's like a big subconscious block, and it takes a lot of self-actualization, a lot of meditation, a lot of really honest self-analysis to really begin to understand why you do these things, why you act so irrationally in certain situations. It's difficult. It is a very difficult placement.
And something that came to mind with that in terms of like these subconscious blocks to your spirituality, and it's having that ability to understand underlying reasons for things that are manifesting. So a thing is with the nature of the 12th house is that sometimes if there's a planet in there, you don't really understand the nature of that energy or that planet itself. Sometimes you don't even know what it is because it's so subconscious. So it's like, imagine you don't know what your fears are until they hit you in the face, sort of thing. So that can be one potential thing to happen, but also not being aware of your own undoing, like your own self-undoing because of subconscious behaviors that you do. So this could be self-limitation, self-restriction, putting in walls and boundaries where they shouldn't be, and doing things that you think will manifest the results that you want, but are actually a hindrance to your goals.
Absolutely.
So it's like putting all your energy and efforts into the wrong places because you're kind of confused as to I imagined that it was going to be like this, so I did the action, but it didn't manifest in how I thought it would. Does that make sense? So it's like you kind of fantasize about a process, and then you take action on it, but the process wasn't really reality based. It was kind of an unrealistic goal or unrealistic approach, and then you kind of wonder why, I put in so much time and effort. Yeah,
it's one of the more difficult Saturn placements to explain.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially since there's such a wide range of ways that it can manifest. You have to look at really the whole chart. You have to look at the ruler of the 12th house and where it's deposited. It's troublesome.
And that's going to be the same with all the placements too, is that it's never going to be every single theme of that house, because I feel when it comes to the Saturn stuff, in terms of karma and the houses, I feel like it's actually quite microscopic in terms of being very focused on something. Like,
yeah,
it does have a general theme throughout life, but when it comes to the actual return, I feel like there's going to be a highlight of something.
Oh, exactly.
About that house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Usually, especially with the houses that have, I mean, some houses are easy. Like the second house, it's either money, what you value, like materially, or what you value within yourself. Some of the other houses, like the fifth house, it can be sex, creativity, children, gambling. You know, it can be so many different things. So you have to really look at the rest of the chart. Yeah. That's where it's really good to get a professional astrologer involved. But also, you can do a lot of research on your own chart. That's what I.
It can get super microscopic to the point where it's just like if you're an artist and during your Saturn return that you've made all these grand paintings and they don't sell for whatever reason, like it can be so finite because it's all based on your own life experience. So this is kind of like, it's going to be a general overview, and obviously because it is general, we can't give a precise interpretation of every single house placement when it comes to Saturn. So for anyone watching this thinking like if they've got Saturn in the fifth house and like, oh, what if I can't have kids or whatever like that, it's like that may not actually be the lesson that you're going to experience in regards to Saturn in the fifth for you.
Yeah, and it also could just be difficulty having kids. And I mean, if you have problems having kids, just keep trying.
That's what my mum did. My mum, she went to a tarot reader when she was 20, and they said, you're going to have an only child. It's going to be a boy. I'm like, a lot of fire, so I'll take
it. Maybe you were a boy in your last life. Your moon isn't a masculine sign. They say that's a marker.
I've pretty much got one Earth placement. No, two. I've got Saturn and Virgo. Saturn in Taurus and Sun in Virgo, and then Pisces, Jupiter. But that's pretty much all my feminine sign placements. The rest of it's like air and fire, blowing smoke and fire tornadoes.
Boom.
Yeah.
Right. So we made it. We marathoned it out.
Virtual high
five. So, as I always say at the end of every single episode, I do offer consultations. Ellie will be offering consultations as soon as she feels comfortable doing so, and I will make sure that...
I'm making my website right now.
Awesome. And I will be posting links to all of the relevant blogs and any links that Ellie provides for me to get to her various pages on behalf of the Celestial Witch. And keep tuning in, guys. I post content regularly. I try to post a video every day as of right now, but every other day
I'm bloody exhausted.
Huh?
I'm surprised you're not exhausted.
I'm dead on the inside.
Same.
No. So yes, I try to post videos every day. But this actually may very possibly be the last video that I do in the current state that I'm in. I will probably be in Los Angeles by the time I am able to film again. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, until next time, guys. And also keep tuned because I will definitely have plenty more. I will have plenty more episodes featuring the brilliant and wonderful Ellie Mooring. So, all right. Well, till next time, guys.